On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we talk about one entrepreneur's journey for 3 different companies in Proptech, how she started them, sold them, a famous Zillow dinner. It's juicy. Tune in. You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Keith Robinson, aka Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about Melissa Kwan, the co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, in our conversation.
Yeah, well, finally, we're not going to talk about lawsuits for an episode.
That's true.
So we thought we'd dazzle you with someone with a really interesting, thoughtful entrepreneurial journey. She's launched 3 companies, 2 of them inside of real estate, 1 outside. She's managed to become a digital nomad, live in 2 different countries. She's just a really interesting person who is brilliant and an entrepreneurial story that anyone should listen to, especially people who don't know where they're next. Oh, and
the Zillow dinner. You have to listen because of the Zillow dinner. She
probably has one of the most gangster stories of how to get people's attention in residential real estate I've ever heard. It's pretty rad. So put it in your ear, kids. You're going to dig it.
Melissa, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you. I have to start by asking, where are you located today?
Great question.
This will make a lot of sense in a minute for all the...
You never know.
Yeah. Today I am in Amsterdam.
Where were you last week?
Until yesterday, I was in Turkey. Specifically, yesterday I was in Cappadocia.
Okay. Well, so we'll cover that for everybody that's listening and following and everything else. But we're excited to have you. I guess let's start with, since you're already started with some interesting answers, tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Are you a spy?
Are you a spy? Do you work for the CIA?
Are you running from the law?
I wish I was as cool as that.
Yeah, that would be
and
great.
if I were, I would not tell you.
That's
or maybe
fair.
you would.
I'm good at my job.
Maybe there's one of those where you would because a real spy never would. Maybe it's no, never mind. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
I get you. Okay. Well, I mean, in a nutshell, I'm a tech founder, had 3 startups, all bootstrapped. My first 2 companies were both in real estate or Proptech. My second company, Spatio, I sold in 2019 after running it for 5 years. And that's where we all met.
That is true.
That's right.
And after that company was acquired in 2019, I started my current company, eWebinar, 2 months after. To solve the problem of doing the same webinar, demo, training over and over again. And that brings me to today. So I've been running eWebinar for 4 years now. And I am also, I guess, a part-time nomad now, not full-time. Amsterdam is home for Amsterdam is home for 2/3 months a year.
That's pretty nomadic.
Yeah, but actually we are now going to build a second home in Bangkok. So I will be going there in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Okay. All right. Well, so I mean, we have a lot of questions to get through, but
lots.
I mean, we're going to ask this, but how the hell did you get out of real estate? It usually just sucks everybody in and they can't ever make the exit.
I know. After my first company, I was like, I will never do real estate again. And then it did suck me in once more. It sucked me in once more. And that experience was so, I don't know how else to say this, but it was so soul crushing.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And it was so hard. Mainly because of what I was doing, right? The product that I was doing was very niche. Mm-hmm. Right? We couldn't really expand beyond what it was. For people that don't know, it's Spatio was and is an open house check-in app. Mm-hmm. It was just so niche that we just couldn't expand the business beyond.
It sort of was what it was, right?
Yeah. And I just said, after that, I'm just not going to be in real estate anymore. And even when I started eWebinar, all these my real estate friends were coming to me thinking this was built for real estate. I'm like, please do not brand it as that. This is a completely industry agnostic thing that anybody can use, any industry, any language, anywhere in the world. So it did take me a while to actually get people's head out of the fact that I'm in real estate because I'm not.
So we're going to press at some point during this podcast on why you have those feelings, but I'm sure we can, all of the listeners are going to be like, oh God, here we go. And man, you exited at the right time because the drama llama has run through knocking over all the tables in real estate the past 12 to 18 months. So like you're in a good spot.
You got out at the right time.
Well, just know that I have an open house software, and I don't know if you guys remember 2020, but open houses were like against the rules.
Yeah,
no,
good timing.
Good timing.
They were against the law in some parts of the country.
Good timing. So, let's do this. We always ask our guests 3 questions just to kind of give people a little bit of a background on you, and then we'll dive into all of the topics on real estate and sort of your journey, because we think your journey is very interesting from bootstrap to selling a business. And this will be good for a lot of the PropTech entrepreneurs that listen to our podcast to like have some inspiration as well. But
and really anyone who, wakes up every day and doesn't know where their paycheck comes from.
Yeah.
Right. Like real estate agent, broker owner, like anyone who wakes up every day and isn't counting on a salary. Melissa's lived that life for a long time. So let's hit her with the rapid fire. Go.
Okay. So if you were a superhero, who would it be and why?
So I don't have a superhero that I want to be, but I do want a superhero skill.
Fine.
And if I could have any superhero skill, I would want to speak every language in the world fluently.
Oh, so you'd be like Miss Rosetta Stone or whatever. Like, that would be your superhero.
Yeah, I would be. If I could be any superhero, I would be Rosetta Stone.
That's first of all, there should be one. That's a great freaking superhero name.
Imagine, right? Being able to speak every language in the world fluently. I'd be super rich.
Not to go too deep, but like if aliens landed, which I guess now we're saying has happened, would you immediately learn that language in your superpower? Or are we going too deep into the...
Well, I think your question is like, I would want to speak every language in the world, but in this world, maybe.
Okay. All right.
So if an alien came, that would not be in this world. So.
Yeah. It's a very strange conversation now.
Yeah. Never mind. All right. Favorite book or podcast? And we're just going to press right through that one. Favorite book or podcast and why? Other than this one, of course.
My favorite book is The Alchemist.
Ooh, great book.
If you haven't read it, you definitely should. I probably read it like 20 times in my life, and I've gotten like at different stages of my life, and it inspired me differently. But it is just the ultimate story of someone who leaves home to chase their dream and goes through all of these different obstacles and things like that, and ends up exactly where they are. I have like goosebumps even saying that, but it's not like an entrepreneur book, but it also is.
It's sort of a parable. Fable. It's
just amazing.
About life. Yeah, it's a great one.
I can see why you like that, by the way.
I'm going to reread that one this year. I'm going to reread that one this year. All right, James, hit it with the last one.
Yeah, so if you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, who would it be and why?
So the co-founder of a company called Basecamp, like 37 Seconds Basecamp, like David, I forgot, like I can't even pronounce his name. It's like Hannemeyer Hansen or something, like DHH.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite writers. Like all his, he wrote this one piece called Reconsider, and it is the best personal essay that makes a case for bootstrapping that I have ever read. And just the ideas around like, working remotely or, optimizing for happiness over revenue and not taking investor money, like all of that is amazing. And being able to build, Basecamp from nothing to who knows how many millions that they're at right now, and being able to call all their own shots, like that's like the thing. Like I want to grow up and be this guy.
Yeah. Well, you're on your way.
I mean, he's also like a race car driver, and he's never driven a car until he was like early 20s.
Wow.
Yeah. And now he's like a race car driver, like just on the side casually. So,
right.
That's interesting. I'm gonna actually look that up because that's ironically in our business we bootstrapped it, and so we're always been proud of the fact that we've been able to call our own shots in Next Homes just for relevance. I just find that fascinating. I'll have to read some of his stuff. So, Keith, let's take the next question. Take us out. So
maybe start with just your, I don't know, like you touched on it a little, but you've bootstrapped 3 companies. What's your entrepreneurial ethos? Like, what's your belief system around being an entrepreneur and building companies, and how do you approach it when you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so I didn't really get to come up with that ethos and philosophy until after Spaceo was acquired, because I was just in survival mode
You were just
for so
grinding, right?
long. My parents are not entrepreneurs. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of winged it. And I just never had time to breathe. I was always paying someone else's bills and never had a real livable salary. Like if I think like of the 10 years that I ran two real estate companies, like real estate tech companies, the only year and a half that I got a real paycheck was when I was working for HomeSpotter.
Right. When you got
Like,
acquired.
Yeah. Before that, I was just like siphoning money here and there, paying bills, taking side projects, making sure everyone else was paid before I was paid.
So that's it. I have to ask this because Keith knows this is like a pet peeve of mine. Here it comes. I hate it when people say that like, oh, you're so lucky, or it must be great being the CEO, and like it's just, your world's different than everybody else's. And I'm not saying there isn't luck, but most entrepreneurs I speak with, it's just sheer grit and like perseverance, and you want to throw in the towel like 800,000 times during the journey because you're just like, this is so hard. And you did this for 10 years?
It's now 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you want to be rich, you should just work for a big company and work your way up and learn how to invest your money wisely.
But that is like the opposite of what social media is telling everybody right now, right? Like all of social media says, quit your job, go be an entrepreneur. So how do you balance that?
I mean, I want to answer your previous question first of like, what is my philosophy? Like when I got to just kind of do a postpartum, I'm like, okay, like, number one, like, why was I never satisfied for 10 years? Like, why was I waking up? And that's why I actually sold the company. Like I was waking up frustrated and not wanting to be there. And it just, that feeling was not going away. And it was very lonely because I couldn't tell my co-founder, because, I've sold him my dream. This was not our dream. This was my dream.
You're like, I've got this great idea. 5 years later, you're like, not so fast.
Yeah. And I'm like, I hated supporting my customers. I didn't want to go to any more conferences, right? I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't want to be there, right? And so when I had a chance to really think about like what I want to do next, was kind of when I came up with, I guess, my now ethos is, I think a lot of people start a company or pick a career based on their education or their experience or both. They think, I was in real estate in the business side for 3 years, and then I sold software at SAP, and then I just combined the two.
Right. Made sense.
And
right?
it made sense. But I realized I was not truly satisfied or happy because I built a company not on top of what made me happy, but because of what I knew. And a lot of people do that, right? And if what makes you happy and what you know are the same thing, you've kind of hit the jackpot, right? But like how it's not so different than someone who goes to school to be a lawyer and then they become a lawyer and then they're too deep into it, but they hate being a lawyer.
Yeah. And then they open up
and then they can't get out.
Right. And then they do chef pop-ups on the weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
And then they're like on the way to being partner. So they don't want to give that up. Right. So I was there. And so my ethos is really like, figure out what makes you happy. And it's not like this product makes you happy. It's like, for example, I made a list of 10 non-negotiables, and it was like, must have a remote team, no more in-person conferences, has to be able to sell over the internet, right? Like, so people sign up on their own, not like you sell one-on-one. So I made a list of those. And those were the things that I needed to be happy. And then I actually, through that process, eliminated 95% of the ideas that I had.
Because it didn't fit that checklist.
Yeah, that didn't fit that. And now, even though things are hard, I'm feeding my happiness, right? So for example, like if I hate going to conferences and doing one-on-one sales, but the industry and what I was selling requires me to do that, I'm pissed off like 6 months of the year. And that's actually what was happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my ethos is really happiness before revenue. So that's kind of a new thing.
Well, it's interesting because you only get one chance at this that we know of, at least, right? So if you spend, 60% of your time working, I think that's what the number was.
60% would be great.
I'm trying to lower that.
I know. Sorry, Keith. But like,
60% would be great, especially like 200%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but going back to your question of like, okay, how do you balance that? It's like, I no longer balance that.
Right.
Because I now have this philosophy, I realize that I want to integrate my work and my life together, and rather than compartmentalizing, because we're not creatures that can compartmentalize. But if I
built
put
a business,
if I put happiness in front of revenue, then everything's integrated.
That's really interesting.
You built a business that would fit the life that you wanted, as opposed to building a business, then living
and then finding a life,
and then finding a life that right. You inverted the paradigm, basically.
And I think most people, especially in our industry, they're looking at things from the revenue perspective. But then, I mean, we all have met, we all have friends in real estate, and lots of them in our case, and most people aren't happy. They're working 7 days a week. They're not able to spend time with their kids. Like they're reversed in what you're referring to. So
I even know a lot of entrepreneurs who have started business, but they sort of like, I don't know, rear view mirror it, right? Like I have the lifestyle I want because I'm an entrepreneur. Kind of, but you actually just built the business and grinded and suffered and it didn't perfectly align. And then it got big enough where you could buy your time back, right? Versus
so
what you did was sort of started that way from the beginning and said, okay, I've done this twice. I mean, experiential learning, right? I've done this twice. I know what I don't want. So let me figure out what I do want, which I think is powerful. I've got a favorite Melissa story that I want to ask about if we're ready to shift gears a little. Okay.
Do it.
So we've talked about grit and the importance of grit. I don't like fake it till you make it. I think that's sort of a silly statement. But maybe if you aren't saying, oh shit, every once in a while in your business, because you're afraid, then you aren't doing
times of the day.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind, would you be willing to tell the Zillow dinner story? Because it's my favorite. It's my favorite Melissa Kwan
That's one
story.
of my favorites, actually.
It's so good.
I don't even know this.
Oh, brace yourself.
Yeah.
I'm bracing.
This is going to be great. Go ahead. Tell the story.
So that is a good story. And it's one of those things where you're like, wait, I did that? Like, you know how there's there's a time in your life when you're so experienced, where experience hinders you and you're just not willing to do things because it's so painful.
Right.
I wasn't there. I was super green, and I was willing to do anything because I had to. I was so committed to making this thing go. So it's an interesting story. So basically, I had just moved to New York, and I had this co-living space, which you guys have both seen. So for people that don't know, it's like I became a group of 3 people that pooled our resources to rent like a massive 5-bedroom, 2-level townhouse that we could live and work out of, but also have like our own events and also have professional events. So it was like the live work type space. And there we would host a bunch of dinners and stuff. So I moved to New York. I was at the lowest point of my career. I had no money. Like 95% of money I was giving myself, like siphoning myself at the end of the month, was to pay rent. And for, you guys don't know this, but for a year and a half, I only had $100 in my account every day.
Really?
So I would go to startup events for food, and I would have a sweet green salad every day at 4:30, because if I ate at 4:30, then I wouldn't be hungry at night. So I did that for a year and a half.
Jeez.
And I couldn't make Spaceo go. And
Yeah.
Spaceo wasn't really what it was yet. Like I was still trying different open house apps, but like I couldn't get people to pay me money for what I was building. And so I was like, okay, so how do I put my name on the map? Like I need people to talk to me and start building partnerships with me and start paying attention to me. I'm like, okay, Inman's happening in January. I know. I'm going to host a real estate leadership dinner out of my house. Because when people come to your house, instead of going to a restaurant, it's a different relationship.
Right.
But the other thing is, I didn't have money to go to a restaurant. You can't ask people to pay when you're hosting a dinner.
Right.
So then I wanted to host a real estate dinner during Inman at my house, because my dining table fit 18 people. But I'm like, well, wait, like, how am I supposed to get people to show up at my dinner? Like, I'm like a nobody. So I was like, I know, I'm going to invite Spencer Raskoff as my special guest to my house to have, like, you know, to do this real estate leadership dinner. And that's what I was going to call it. It was real estate leadership dinner.
Just in case someone's listening and they aren't sure who Spencer Raskoff is, share with us who Spencer Raskoff is.
He was the CEO of Zillow at the time.
Right.
He's no longer, but he was at the time. And I think it was like 2016 or 2017. I think it was 2017. So like early 2017. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna cold email him.
Yeah.
So then I emailed Spencer Raskoff and I was like, hey, I'm hosting this real estate leadership dinner. It's a day before Inman. We'd love for you to be our special guest. Are you free? I'm like, I'm like, many people are going to come. And then he was like, oh, I don't know what my schedule is. Can you check back in a month? And for people who don't know Spencer, he is the most responsive executive in the industry. Like, he will respond to like anyone. He's just a super nice guy. I didn't know this at the time. So of course, like, I follow up.
Just to put a pin in that for 2 seconds. You cold emailed the CEO of Zillow to invite him to the dinner
at my house,
at your house. Okay,
yeah,
continue.
that I was hosting, where many people are going to show up,
and he was the special guest.
Yeah, I didn't say how many people. I just said people are going to show up. Yeah, many people are going to show up. I'm just hosting this dinner. It's like a 16-person dinner or something like that.
Yeah.
So I check up with him in a month, and fully expecting him to be like not respond, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm free. Can I also bring a friend of mine who's with Street Easy?" Which I guess like they had bought at the time. Street Easy is like the Zillow of New York. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
I forget her name, but she
Super
runs
cool.
Zillow now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, well, now that I have Spencer at my dinner.
Well, hold on. Did you run around the apartment doing the happy dance, or like what happened? You read that email.
I mean, I was like nervous because I'm like, well, what if nobody shows up? Like, what if no one shows up? Right.
Yeah,
So then I just went to the Inman site and I made a list of all the CEOs and founders that I wanted to show up. And these are all like tech founders. Like, you know, back then it was like Boston Logic, you know, Jeff Turner, you know, and I didn't know anybody. And then I emailed all of them and I said, hey, I'm hosting a leadership dinner. Spencer is going to be there. I would love for you to come. And
ballsy.
Yeah. And then most people say yes. Some people are like, oh, I'm not going to fly in till, till a day later. I'm like, I think you should change your ticket. So then I got multiple people to change their flights, including Aaron Cardell, who was the CEO of HomeStarter, who ended up buying my company.
Eventually bought your company.
So the reason I met Aaron is because of that dinner. And so, 16 people came, Spencer did show up, and there's more. Because I couldn't pay for dinner, and the wine and all the food, I ended up on the other side needing to find a sponsor for that dinner. So then I found a sponsor to pay for that dinner, and it wasn't even a relevant sponsor. I wanted someone irrelevant because I didn't want them to steal my spotlight. So it was just like a social media platform that just did like a quick pitch, and basically paid for that dinner, had everybody show up. Inman wrote about it. Like one of the writers wrote about it, and then it became the Zillow dinner. And then I had separate meetings with, everybody at that table throughout that week. And then eventually,
that is a hell of an awesome story.
That's
and
my favorite Melissa Kwan story.
Straight up gangster. Like,
gangster.
You
and I wrote about this a few months ago, and then Spencer, like for the first time.
Yeah,
Spencer
never knew,
just
right?
Yes.
He never knew. He never knew.
I bet he has total respect for you for doing that, though. I mean, that is gangster. So, well, but like, let's make a moral of this story. I always tell people when they ask, how do you get to the level of success where you are and what you've done? And most of the time I tell people you just got to be willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah. You
ask questions, just try. And so what if you get shot down? Like,
well, you end up exactly where you were.
Literally in the same spot anyway. So like, it doesn't hurt to try and put it out there. I mean, there's a good lesson there in residential real estate right now for all of you people listening in residential real estate. Pick up the phone and call people. Worst case scenario, they say, I'm not interested in selling my house. Yeah. Like,
anyway.
And then we had that dinner every year after that.
Right. It became a thing.
And then it became a thing. And then Andrew Flackner and I started doing it together, and it became
still doing it,
a broker dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. To see that kind of live on.
Yeah. I actually just attended one of those in Austin. and Andrew was hosting it with Plunk. It was great. It was fun. It was there was like 25 people, and it's definitely an interesting event. And it's funny because when I was there, I was thinking to myself, Melissa should be here. So
yeah, you miss what's the famous American philosopher Michael Jordan once said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Like you gotta shoot your shot, right? And like you said, worst case, you end up back where you were.
So I got a question I want to ask because you brought it up in the beginning, and I want to make sure we get to some of the juicy stuff. So what, like, you're not really in the real estate space anymore. You've obviously got eWebinar, and we can talk about that for a few minutes. But I do want to also just like, what was the thing that drove you out of the industry? Like, let's get some of the dirty laundry aired about the problems with this business as a tech entrepreneur, literally trying to help people do more transactions.
I mean, there were multiple things, right? One was that it was just too small for what I was doing.
Okay.
Because if you can think about, like, just to give people an idea of how niche it is, right? Like, how many agents are there in the US now? Like, is it 1.5 million or
roughly
somewhere like that? Okay,
about
so
to
let's
be a
say
lot less, but yes.
Yeah. So let's say a percentage of those are like active, like producing.
Yeah.
Right.
10 to 20%.
And so a fraction of those are producing. A fraction of those will do open houses.
Right.
And then a fraction of those will even consider automating those.
Right.
Like using technology. So that's our total addressable market. And real estate is so regional that, like, it's not like you cannot take this technology applied to Europe or Asia like that, because that's just not how they sell
different
real
models.
estate.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah,
by the
and
way,
like,
if you'd explain that to the Department of Justice, that would be helpful. Different conversation, but like it doesn't operate the same around the rest of the world.
Yeah, like for example, in Amsterdam, like they're salaried employees, so they don't host open houses, and they're not that ambitious or aggressive. Like they don't need open houses to generate leads. The lead belongs to the agency. Right. The commission goes to the agency and then gets distributed as a bonus.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the big difference. So that's how small it was. So that's one. But number two, like, it's just a super backwards industry in the sense that, like, agents are laggards of technology. That's one. But the major issue is they're not used to buying technology. Like they are used to spending money, but just not on that thing.
Right.
So they'll spend money on, like, wine, right? Or like a gift for their clients or leads, but they don't buy, like, software that makes them more productive. Like their broker has to buy it. And then the margins of the brokerage is, as you guys know, right, diminishing over time. You have to be more competitive. And then that software budget has to be spread across many different vendors. So not only are you fighting for budget that is like kind of slimming,
dwindling.
Yeah. And you're
Right.
you're also needing to support people who just don't understand technology in a way that someone else in another industry might, right? So to give you an example, like half the people that we work with, like that use our software, literally cannot understand offline mode. Because we're an open house software, you need to be able to use it without service. Right? Like maybe this house doesn't have internet.
Sure.
But they don't understand that you actually need to log in at home and download all your open houses first before you go. Like they don't understand why they can't log in without internet. So now you've got a really angry person at their open house not being able to use this, and they then bring a clipboard. And then that's my problem. Right. And then and then their agents, angry agents are loud. They complain about us to their manager or, their broker, and they don't like it.
Yeah.
Right. And then also, like, because of the nature of my business is most active on weekends.
Right.
So not only now do I have angry people who don't understand technology, they're eating away at my weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a super small team. So we take all the calls, we do all the support, right? And my best customers have me on text. And then when a high producing, their top, like, golden goose is screaming about it, I'm getting a text.
Sorry about those weekend texts.
Oh, no, but you guys are actually like the best customers because you guys are more reasonable.
When we provide first line
but
support.
you guys know that this happens, but not everyone is as empathetic. So there was just a lot of this.
What I think that some of that isn't like what it takes to be a great real estate professional isn't what it takes to be really good at technology.
Oh, for sure.
I think real estate agents are really, really good humanists. right? They can intuitively understand what a human being needs in the moment and provide them that, whether it's a pat on the back, a kick in the ass, whatever they need. They're intuitively pretty good at that. So they're brilliant humanists, but below average in general, below average technologists.
But I wasn't getting paid enough for that pain. And, and that was the issue. Right. Like I wasn't, if I was selling leads for a couple $100 a lead and I'm pumping out thousands or tens of thousands a month, I'd be like, call me on the weekend.
Did you have integration with MLSs and work with associations at all? Were you involved in either one of those two?
Only at like the kind of the data level.
And what was that like?
I mean, we tried to sell to MLSs, and some of the agents that didn't want to pay for it and their broker wasn't paying for it wanted us to offer it through their MLS. But like everybody that's worked with an MLS knows that it's just fucking horrible, right? Like they don't want to pay you because, you know, they don't have enough money.
That's a technical term that Melissa learned in business school.
And like, and then so they want to offer your software for maybe a freemium. Or like they want to put you in their app store. Like there is like no successful app store outside of Apple or like, you know, Google or whatnot. But they don't also give you a hunting license. So at least if you work with a franchise, they give you a hunting license.
Right.
But an MLS will never give you their list of agents.
Right.
So not only do they want you to give it away for free and they don't have money to pay for it because maybe it competes with their members and their brokers, they don't give you a hunting license.
So you can't
upsell. So then you can't actually upsell.
So it somewhat inhibits innovation in a way, like just in general of how we get more innovation into the hands of the industry is there's almost too many barriers in that process. Basically, you've got so many hands in the pot at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's why, like, I feel like after Spacio, like my responsibility as a human being is to convince other startup founders who are not currently in real estate, who think real estate is an awesome opportunity, away from doing it. But at least if they want to do it, then I want to let them know like what are the potential obstacles that they would have to overcome.
Our industry has got a lot of problems. Keith and I met going to an industry function where we were in the middle of 2008-9. Everybody in the room was talking about how great their companies were. And Keith and I stood up and like, you're all full of shit. We're all broke. We're about to all die at this point. We left the meeting and went to the bar and drank for 4.5 hours.
And talked.
Talked a lot about a lot of things. That's literally a true story. But my point though is, I think that whenever I meet with entrepreneurs and they're like, okay, there's 1.5 million realtors and we're going to get 30% market share. And I'm like, nope, you're not. Actually, that's completely inaccurate. But, you know, I think he's got a good point in that, you know, this industry we're very good humanists. We try very hard to shelter clients and walk them through an extraordinarily emotional transaction. And we're just not good at the business operations side, which to your point, though, is like, that's the whole point of Spacio, is to make things more efficient and easier.
Right.
But the industry just struggles with the ability to take this high emotional individual and then get them to be a business operator, and they're all operating their own businesses. I mean, they're all independent contractors for the most part. And so it's a tough business. And it can be very difficult. And to your point, you've obviously gone to a lot of therapy since to try and get out of residential real estate. So, well, we only have a few minutes. So tell us just real quick, I wanted you to wrap up with like a few key points, but you're doing eWebinar, which is a really interesting product. So do you have like the 30 seconds about what it is? I think it's a really fascinating tool, especially with the world that we're in today.
Yeah, full disclosure, we use it. We love it. Like I would try very hard not to fanboy, but as someone who hates demos, because I do most of the demos for new products for our company, having something that makes it easier to present demos is amazing. So the 3-minute elevator pitch on eWebinar.
Yeah. So eWebinar, we automate live webinars. So imagine all the live demos, live training, onboarding that you're doing over and over, or you wish you could be doing, but no one wants to run them because everyone hates running the same thing over and over again. We take a video, we deliver it as a webinar that you can set on a recurring schedule or make available on demand. So agents can watch their trainings, watch their demos at evenings, weekends, middle of the night, and you never have to be there to run them live. And we preserve the chat component. So when they ask a question, if you happen to be there, you can respond live. But if you're not there, you wake up in the morning, you can answer all their questions through email. So every single question is answered. They get the content that they want. And you can run hundreds of webinars every single month without actually being in front of a camera.
This would be a fantastic tool for brokerages to have for training on all different programs and exams.
We also work with MLSs because they have like so much training and like one trainer.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes to learn more about eWebinar. All right. So, we've got just a couple minutes. We would be remiss, in my opinion, if we didn't ask you about your sort of digital nomad experience. It's something that you've done for a long time. Was that just sort of who you've always been, or was that learned behavior?
Yeah, I think it's learned behavior. I actually just wrote about this. It's interesting, right? Because when Spacio started, was approaching profitability. Mm-hmm. And remember, this was my second company. My first company became my second company. So I was always in survival mode until 7 years into my founder journey. So about 2.5 years into Spacio, we made our first $10.
Yay.
And then within that year, we broke even. And then a year after, we sold the company. So as we were approaching profitability, I freed up the mind share, I guess, to ask myself, what do I want? I spent 7 years paying other people's bills. What is it that would make me happier if this is already going to be hard? And I never traveled as a kid. And I always wanted to do more of it. So that's when I left New York to travel full time, just living out of Airbnbs. And that lasted 3 years before we found Amsterdam and just fell in love with the city and made this a home base. But what's interesting is after 3 years of now eWebinar being on the market, launching the product, we've just hit profitability. And I find myself with a familiar feeling of feeling a bit unsettled with where I am and ready for a new adventure. I'm a big city person. Amsterdam is a small, cozy village, but New York has gotten so expensive that I don't think I can go back there and actually enjoy myself. But I've always wanted to explore Asia more. I love Bangkok. Bangkok is the New York of Asia. And we've decided to make that a winter home, but also more of a second home. But it's and I realized through now living through this twice that when work is so chaotic, I need everything else to be calm.
Structured.
I just cannot have any unpredictable elements in my life. But when work stabilizes, I'm now craving chaos.
You're chaos. Maybe that's your superpower. You're chaos creator.
I want new stuff in my life now that it's becoming better and better. And the thing is, eWebinar is now the highest revenue, biggest company I've ever built. We just hit 1.5 million ARR. I've never gotten here. And so everything is new, but I'm comfortable, right? For the first time ever, I'm paying everyone's bills. We have a livable salary. That's weird.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. So I'm excited about what the next phase holds, and also be able to be in a new city, be more creative, meet interesting people, and also, build this on the side.
We love this story and your journey. I know Keith and I are obviously huge fans of you and everything that you've accomplished. And what can't wait to do another one of these with you. I guess to be in Bangkok the next time we probably do this. So
you guys should come visit.
Okay. So
I'm done, totally in. So I've never been, but I've always wanted to go. So Melissa, thank you so much for being here. We enjoyed your story, your journey, and we look forward to hearing more of these stories. And I want to hear the next gangster move that you did in your next venture with the Zillow dinner.
Experience now hinders me, so I don't do all those I don't do all those cool things.
Maybe that's the thing you have to go back to doing.
Yeah.
So anyways, great to see you. So
thanks so much.
You don't want to let Keith down, do you? Hit subscribe, and not only will you never miss an episode of this podcast, but you'll also never make Keith sad. He's easily entertained.